Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesday, hosted by Out of the Box Technology. My name is Jennifer Darachuk, and I will be your moderator today throughout the session. A little bit about Out of the Box Technology. If you haven't joined us in the past, or maybe it's been a while, we are anything and everything QuickBooks. Here at Out of the Box Technology, we have a team of expert QuickBooks trainers, those that can help you with integration and continued support as you use all versions of QuickBooks. We also have an amazing bookkeeping team that offer their services on recurring bookkeeping services or just a one-off project that you might have for us. Data migrations, which is something we're going to talk about today, and more. So today I'm very pleased to welcome our very own Director of Data Services, Vicki. She is an excellent addition to our team, and I've really enjoyed getting to know her since she has come under our umbrella last year. So today, a little bit of housekeeping before I hand things over to Vicki. We can earn continuing education credits for today's session. We'll have a couple of poll questions throughout the session that you can go ahead and answer. And you don't have to stay for the whole time, but as long as you answer all those polling questions, you can earn your CPE for this presentation. You'll receive an email with that certificate later on this afternoon. Again, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and use your chat function there on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be sure to answer your questions towards the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Vicki, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself as well as get started on data migrations. Vicki, welcome. You might still be muted, Vicki, if you want to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't know I was. So hi, everybody. I'm just trying to make sure I get the right monitor over here. Okay, you don't need to see all my dirty work here. So as Jennifer said, that I'm Vicki Bohr. I'm Director of Data Migration Data Services here. We do a lot of things. I'm also an accountant and been doing accounting for a lot of years. I'm an Intuit Advanced Pro Advisor. I know all of their applications inside and out, as well as a university professor. I have done QuickBooks at the university level as well as Microsoft Office tools.
Awesome. And Vicki, just so you know, I don't know if you wanted to switch over to the presenter view because we can see your notes slide and stuff.
Yeah, I tried to show my other screen, but it's not working there. Okay, hang on. All of a sudden, yeah, that's interesting. It didn't. Let's try that one. Yeah. How about that one?
Perfect.
Okay. So yeah, it renumbered my screen. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
That's why we always have these boring slides in the beginning so that we can get this technology worked out. All right. So we're going to talk today about your data migrations and why you want to migrate to a new QuickBooks file. So for us here at Out of the Box, a data migration involves taking data from another source to QuickBooks. That could be an accounting software such as Timberline and Sage, and even Peachtree comes around once in a while, Xero, SAP. A lot of SAP people want to go to enterprise. So that could be for a number of reasons that it's not meeting your current needs, it's being discontinued, could be expensive, could be limited, doesn't give you what you need. Same thing with third-party apps. Some people started out with a third-party app that was centric around their business operations, kind of making it work, but realize that now that their business is bigger, they want more information, they want measurements, they want yardsticks, things like that. We've had people that have had homegrown systems. They've had Access databases that got created 20, 25 years ago, and due to all the office upgrades, things like that, they just no longer can make it work or put it together, or the person who created it is no longer there or even alive in some cases. So they want to migrate to QuickBooks. And then believe it or not, we do a lot of migrations from QuickBooks to QuickBooks. And there's many different reasons that happens. And the file's either gotten too big, they want to go to a different version of QuickBooks, they've got data corruption or performance issues, their business model is changed, or the file was set up incorrectly. And we'll talk about some of those things in a little bit. So For some reason it will not. There we go. So the goal of a data migration for us is to capture as much historical information as possible, is necessary, or needed from the other source and replicate it in a new QuickBooks file. So that's the goal here, and we work with you to create the plan to accomplish that. So the first thing I want to talk about is migrating from QuickBooks to QuickBooks, because it's not as apparent to a lot of people why you would even do that. So a lot of reasons that people migrate is a version change. They may need to go from Pro or Premier to Enterprise. Pro and Premier are limited in how much data and information you can actually have in those files. They're limited to 14,500 entries in all of the lists that you have. So that could be customers, items, vendors, active or inactive. And I'll talk about in a few more slides kind of how you can look at that. Then there's also the people that want to go to desktop to QBO or QBO to desktop. Those are some migrations that you have to be very, very careful about, because the transition to those does not always go smoothly. The data is not an exact replica. They are not mirror programs of each other. So taking things from desktop to QBO, there are things that will not migrate up, and people get there and they realize they don't have that information, or it took that information and it twisted it. QBO to desktop, a big thing with that is field length. QBO allows more characters in fields, so your chart of accounts is limited in desktop versus QBO. So what will happen when things get brought down is there's a lot of truncation, and you lose a lot of that, as well as audit trails, bank recs, things like that. So we work with you to make sure that everything's going to come down correctly. We'll audit the results, make sure that that has come over correctly in terms of financial information and pieces like that. So for those kind of aspects. So when we talk about file size, QuickBooks files can get very large. The more transactions you have in there, the longer you've been using it, they just keep growing and growing. Intuit recommends that an enterprise file be less than a gig, Pro and Premier be less than 150 megabytes. Also, you can have a large amount of database fragments, and that will cause issues too, and I'll explain that. So if you guys have your QuickBooks open, and if you hit F2, this is the screen that you're going to see. There's a lot of things on that screen. So this is the screen that if you got Intuit asked you about your license, you'd come here and hit F2. Here is the license number. Here's the product number. This will also tell you how many users and when this version was installed. Another big piece of that right here is what the release number is, because if you start having problems with a file and you haven't done the updates, that could be why. Things have changed a little bit and you're still operating in an older release date, and they actually released a new release to fix that problem. Big thing here is what we talk about here is the file size. This is a really small file, so it's not going to have as many issues. But look at the database file fragments. It's 34. Intuit recommends that it be 12 or less. So when I talk about database file fragments, think about as your data. It's all lined up. It's all ready to go. Equate it to a train. You're sitting at the crossing and you see a big car go by, and all of a sudden you see a flatbed car go by with nothing on it. That's kind of what happens in the links on your database fragments, is that all of a sudden links between transactions, or even in your working memory, you've got large spaces in that. And so QuickBooks has to work harder to try and jump those gaps. It's not one continuous stream. So it can cause your file to become shaky. Improperly closing your file can create large database fragments. You should always, always, always close your QuickBooks by going to File, Close Company, Log Off. That's really important, because closing it in the upper X with any program, Excel, Word, any of those, can cause issues with the file, because it's almost an abnormal termination. The other big thing you want to make sure you do in your QuickBooks file is go under your your desktop preferences and make sure you set that option to don't save the desktop, because what will happen then is it will close all of your open windows before you exit that QuickBooks file. Leaving those open windows creates more database fragments. Earlier, when I talked about going from Pro and Premier, I talked about how you had to, that Pro and Premier maxed out at 14,500. Here is where you can get that total and see where you're going. This is a good number, but as this free memory starts getting smaller, remember that QuickBooks is not going to work as well. It's almost like blowing a balloon up in a box. Yeah, you're going to be able to blow the balloon up, but it's going to be limited by that box. Same thing happens here. If you don't have a lot of free memory, your QuickBooks file is going to be hitting its head against the ceiling on that memory and only able to work as much room as it's got. So to see how many entries you have in all of your list items, unfortunately, it's kind of a manual process. When you see these totals, you just need to add those up as you scroll down through this box, and you can figure out how many you have and how close you're going. QuickBooks will also give you, as you start approaching that exceeding, it will tell you that you're exceeding the, I forgot the exact message, but for Pro and Premier, and and it asks you if you want to upgrade to Enterprise. So that's some of the big things that will be key indicators of why you might need to migrate, is that your memory is not there, the file is too big. People have been using QuickBooks since the 1900s. They've got a lot of data in there. The other thing that can happen is you can have data corruption, and your file keeps shutting down. One of the big questions I ask everybody is, are you doing a backup of the file? And a lot of the times the answer I get is, well, we're on a server, our server's backed up, we don't need to do that. Yes, you do. You still need to use the backup functionality in QuickBooks. A big part of that is that when you do that backup, you need to make sure that you select this complete verification back here. I usually recommend that, and you don't have to be in single user mode, you can do the backup, but I recommend that you do this about once a month. You can trash the backup if you want to. A lot of times I tell you to kind of hang on to at least one copy. But this verification will actually do some file checks on your file. And it's an early warning system to tell you if you've got problems. It will provide a WIN file that will highlight errors. It'll tell you errors that it's fixed. It'll tell you errors after you've done the verify, that it'll tell you things that aren't fixable. So it's just really important that you do that backup in your file regularly. Another part that can happen is that people have separate QuickBooks files. We've had the fact that somebody's file went corrupt, and they had been using the corrupt file for a month or so, but they were able to find a backup of the file that was back from 30 days or so, and it was good. It didn't have those data corruption errors when they ran the verify. We can actually take that good file backup and the data that happened during the time of corruption and actually bring that information into the good file backup so that you're back up and running with an uncorrupt file with the transactions that had happened. You don't have to spend time recreating history. A lot of businesses, if they're not backing up their files or they have problems, end up going out of business due to the fact that they're spending more time recreating the past than focusing on the future. So make sure you are backing up your file. If you don't have a server, and you're not using an Intuit backup system, or I don't recommend, you have to watch Carbon and things like that because the linkage will break and you have to make sure you're monitoring it. I mean, your backup can be as simple as 3 thumb drives numbered 1, 2, 3, and you alternate those thumb drives each day and take them off premise. Because the reason I say 3 is you have to have redundancy. One memory stick might go bad. Now, mine have gone through the washer and dryer and have survived. And then I've also had some that have just laid there on my desk and I couldn't retrieve information on. So you've got to make sure. An external hard drive sitting on top of your desktop is not good. If there's a fire or a theft, guess what happens to your backup? It walks out the door with that computer, or it gets burned up in the process. So make sure that you're using some kind of external backup process. We've also had clients that have had separate files that need merged into one file. I've had a client that they like to buy optometric, other optometric businesses. And so what will happen is they want some of that data up to a certain point brought in to the current file so that they have everything as one file. So we can actually merge files. We've had people that may have had the same tax ID number, but what was happening is they didn't understand the use of classes in the QuickBooks file as a cost center, and they were actually had separate QuickBooks files that related to different aspects of their business. And so then what would happen is they or their accountant would have to try and accumulate all of that information into one file so that taxes could be done, be it an Excel spreadsheet, be it, green ledger paper. That was going on. So we can actually bring data in, and data can be brought in different forms as well. So those are some reasons that you might want to create a new QuickBooks file. A big one that we see a lot are inventory issues. Inventory wasn't set up correctly. You let it go negative first and foremost, and then you let it go negative for long periods of time. Make sure you turn off the don't go negative in your under edit preferences inventory. That is one of the things you really want to avoid. So think about the sales transaction that occurs. You create your invoice, you have sales income, and QuickBooks is supposed to take out of the inventory asset account the amount of what you're selling and put it to cost of goods sold. It does it either on average costing or FIFO in enterprise. So you've got to be really careful, because going negative can make those numbers just be something really bad. And your financials will be impacted, your inventory is impacted, and eventually you'll have file corruption in your file. There's a whole thing around building assemblies, purchase orders, receiving items. What can happen as you get data corruption in that file is none of those link together, and you may have standalone transactions that don't necessarily coordinate. And again, your inventory can be totally not what you want. And we've seen a lot of people just doing inventory adjustments periodically, and I say frequently, like on a weekly basis, trying to keep their inventory patched together. And that's just not the way QuickBooks is meant to run with the inventory module. Another big part of QuickBooks to QuickBooks is setup. A lot of people, bless into it, they market it that you can do it yourself. The QuickBooks has a lot of functionality. I mean, it's a very powerful tool that a lot of people don't take advantage of. And what can happen is people set up the file so that it's just a basic file with kind of a check register functionality, but they want more from it. And because of the way it was set up, to try and get more is too much work to try and undo the original setup. So what we do is we do a new file based on the new business model. Some people have created inventory item types of items and put in that inventory, and but because they're not relieving inventory like QuickBooks intends to relieve inventory, that's a mess. And they decide, you know what, we're really not an inventory type company. We need to be a non-inventory, but we have all of these items set up and it's creating problems. So what we will do is we'll create a new file, and those items will be non-inventory numbers, and that fixes that problem and gives you a file that flows smoother. Item structure. You can actually create a hierarchy in your item structure, and it's really important in that item structure is that you make that understandable and usable by everyone. So think about how many people touch your item list. It could be the accounts payable person, the person that does invoicing, the guys that use an app like Field Service Manager that are actually on site with the client, creating a work order, picking items that they're using from that. And the item structure can actually be a hierarchy of 3, 4, 5 layers deep, that you can organize that item structure so that it's easily found. You can take, let's say I have a lot of belts, the parts. So I could actually make a parent item called belts, and underneath that, I could actually create 1/2 inch belts. And underneath that, I could create Maytag, I can create Whirlpool, I can create Amana, so that the guy in the field can very quickly go, he doesn't have to go digging through and trying to remember part numbers. That is 02-48764-2. He can actually just type in 1/2 inch and it bring up, and then he can pick Maytag, Whirlpool. So those are some things that we talk about, we think about, and we work for. So migrating from a different source, that was pretty self-explanatory. The current system, be it, another online application, be it again, Sage, Timberline, there's so many Xero, there's so many things out there that people want to come to the QuickBooks ecosystem because it's just a well-grown, well-defined ecosystem that has a lot of things that other providers have bolted on. So if you think of a wagon wheel with QuickBooks as the center of that, and you have needs that QuickBooks is not quite fully satisfying, you can actually bolt on different applications that will feed to that center hub, which is QuickBooks and your financial system. We have a lot of people that come to QuickBooks because they have to. I've heard this one before. So what will happen is franchises. Somebody, is with a franchisor and they say, hey, we want everybody on QuickBooks Online because then we're going to use Quivinci to bring all of that data together into one place so that we can actually analyze all of our franchisees and all our financial system in one place. So we do things like that where either the people are brand new and we help them with the QBO, or they've been using something else and we migrate it to the QBO environment and help them link it to whatever system their franchisor is using so that they can get that information. So we work closely with a lot of franchisees on that as well. And again, from a different system that's not QuickBooks, the amount of data that we get really depends on what we can get out of the system, how much information you need, what format it is in. We attempt to get as much information as requested. Sometimes it's not possible just based on the system, but we work with you in trying to determine what all can be brought out, what all do you need it maybe put into some historical, maybe create a QuickBooks file that's historical for all the data and we only bring in some balances, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different opportunities to create this new QuickBooks file. So when we talk about making the plan, we actually have a process that we go through to get this accomplished. And we have the discovery meeting and we look at the data, we make some plans, we actually have to do all the heavy lifting in creating the data, and we actually have the file creation itself. So I'll talk about each of those steps and kind of how we work through all of that. So in the discovery meeting, it's basically tell me your story. What are your pain points? What's going on? Why are you converting? What are the results that you want to end up with at the end of this conversion? What are your goals for this? The anticipated outcomes? Because a lot of times clients come to us with they have a limited, if they're coming from an outside source, they have a limited knowledge of QuickBooks, and we kind of talk and I'll ask questions that they hadn't even considered using QuickBooks for because their old system didn't have that functionality. And so then what will happen is this becomes a much more robust system for them, because then I always say my clients get greedy because they come in expecting one thing, and then I show them the power of what QuickBooks can do and what the things that they can either bolt on or the results that they can get. And then I'm constantly getting emails or calls. Hey, what about this? And sometimes I have to laugh because then they went from they were just going to use it as a checkbook to they're now very robust using it for job costing and all kinds of things. So, is one of your goals better inventory management? We got to figure out, then we got to backtrack and decide how all that inventory is going to be set up, how it's going to be consumed. In enterprise, you can actually use the advanced inventory functionality to have multiple warehouse sites. You can actually even set up bins. I've even actually gone to clients where I've helped them. It was a huge room and we put tape on the floor, and that was a warehouse site, and then we numbered each of the taped off corners in the room to be a bin, and they were able to use the advanced picking function with enterprise using one of the scanners, and they could actually keep track of stuff. Because I had an appliance guy that had no organization in his warehouse, and everything got dumped right inside the door. And then he found that he had older models of dishwashers and stoves and things that were clear in the back because everything had gotten pushed in front of it. So we organized that room and divvied it up, and dishwashers went here and stovetops went here, and he was able to track his inventory, get old inventory out before he ordered new. We work on the timeline. Are you going to do some cleanup beforehand? Did you need the file yesterday because it's a data corruption, crash and burn kind of thing? Are we looking at planning ahead for the end of a quarter or the end of a year? So we have to figure out what the timeline is. Big piece of this is budget. Keep in mind, the more details that you need out of the old data source, the longer it takes. The more it costs. So we work through that and decide, what is going to be the most reasonable for everybody. Then we have to look at the information to be migrated, and we actually have to do some looking at that. Are there problems? What are the details? So we kind of talk through all of that in our discovery meeting. From that discovery meeting, we actually get a copy of either your data source information, the QuickBooks file. We look at, again, what's there. Data fields may not correlate. So people may think, well, why do you need to do a data analysis? I'm in QuickBooks and I'm going to QuickBooks. Well, what can happen is you had QuickBooks back from 1999, and this has actually happened to me. And back then, the program, we all evolve, we all get more sophisticated, and there was a field in the customer setup that is now in newer versions a numeric field only, but they were using it to put other notes in it. So they had alpha letters in there and not numeric. Well, then what happened when I exported that data, because we had to create a new file because they had data corruption. When I exported that customer information out of the old file and tried to bring it into the new file, I got data errors. It would not accept that information because it had letters in it, and QuickBooks now said in this new file, hey, I will not take anything that is not numeric. They could have it in the old file because they just kept upgrading the file, and the file is more sympathetic and forgiving when you do that. But when you come into the brand new version, it's not as generous in terms of how that works. So we have to look at what we're working with and what's the data that needs to go into the new file. From that, we actually make a plan and a roadmap. We analyze the data, the format that it's going to be brought in, the amount, and from there we create a roadmap of how the migration is going to be done and in what time frame. What are the expectations of delivery of the file? What are people's responsibilities, their to-dos, and their delivery dates? Because a lot of times what we do is contingent on what's delivered to us. Some people take the data, even if it's QuickBooks, they clean it up in Excel first so they can get rid of a lot of the garbage that's been there year over year, and then we can bring in a more condensed, clean version. But then again, that's on them, and we have to create that time frame, because when we don't get it, that slows down the creation of the file that we need to create. So we need to kind of go from that. There's a lot of talk and a lot of planning that goes into this. So we want to make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of the plan and the roadmap, because there's a lot of pieces that can be involved in this, especially if you are trying to turn on third-party applications. We have to make sure that the file is mapped accordingly to where the data is going to. Sometimes third-party applications feed to QuickBooks. Sometimes QuickBooks feeds to third-party applications. So we have to make sure that the QuickBooks data structure is going to be compatible with that third-party application. There's also timing in terms of when that third-party application gets turned on. It may not be on a schedule that is under our control. It might be under the control of the third-party app in terms of, okay, we can get you worked onto here, we can do training onto that, so then that drives when we provide the file to you as well. So there's so many factors that can go into this that we just have to have lots of discussion to make sure that we can make it all come together. So we have the file and or the data, and we create the file shell. We turn preferences on. Some of those we actually talk to you about because you don't necessarily even know that they're there, especially if you're coming from a different application. So part of that pre-discussion and plan was to make you aware of some of the applications in QuickBooks and some of the functionality that's available and creating the preferences. We can also help create the users for the file. One of the big things in the historical data is that we actually provide templates for the different lists and the different information. So it makes it easier if it's from a different source, and sometimes even from QuickBooks, that you have this Excel file that you can actually put in the data into this file so that we make sure it's all correct. It's really interesting when this happens because it can highlight a lot of the things from the source file that is not going to be compatible, or it's kind of like doing a puzzle and all of a sudden you've got an extra piece and it's like, I don't think this goes in this box, but I really want this in here. And so then we have to figure out how to take that data and how can we migrate it into a field that is available in QuickBooks and make that data fit. So there's discussion about those points. And once the file is created and ready to go, then we deliver it. And when that's happened, after that happens, oops, there's discussion and training, helping you understand your new file. Are you going to turn on payroll? Payroll requires a whole separate setup and training. Payroll is not something that can be migrated straight one for one. So even if you went from a QuickBooks payroll to the new QuickBooks file, there's actually quite a bit of setup and things that have to happen in there. So we work with you on that. There's all kinds of cool QuickBooks features that are, like I say, involved with inventory and reporting. What happens after we deliver a file is we may spend quite a bit of time with a client in terms of helping them create custom reports and teaching them how to memorize and email those reports out to people, keeping track of those functionalities. Job costing. QuickBooks does a great job at job costing. The trick is you have to understand it. It is not an easy elephant to eat or set up. So we work together with that. I'm an expert in job costing. I can trick it to do all kinds of things, even for nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits use it just kind of checkbook type things to get out their cash flows, their statements of income and expense, that kind of thing. But what's really neat is you can use the job costing functionality in QuickBooks if you're a nonprofit and keep track of your fundraising events. So with some clients, we created trivia night as a customer. We created 2018 and 2019 as jobs. And then what we do is you create an estimate based on the budget for that job, and what do you anticipate your costs to be? And so then as you pay for the expenses, you tack it using the items. And because you've created it in there as a job, you can actually use the job cost reporting that's available in QuickBooks to see exactly how you came out against budget, exactly what are the things you paid for, and what better way to get a new committee chair the next year is to give them this report and say, here, this was what their budget was last year. Here's how they did. This is where they bought everything from. You've got that piece. Same exact thing goes with construction. Track jobs, not just the customers, because you want to be able to know how you did on something. Even if you're a roofer, make sure you do a job. You think that you may only be doing one roof every 20 years. Well, ironically, I'm right outside of St. Louis. We had a hailstorm hit in May. Didn't think to create jobs at the time. This was about 10 years ago. And ironically, we had a hailstorm almost a year to the day, the next May, that everybody got roofs, had to get new roofs. My girlfriend had put her roof on Friday, and the next second hailstorm came on Saturday, and she had to get a new roof. And then what happened with this roofer is we had not created jobs, so we were not able to measure the profitability from roof 2016 to roof 2017. So even if you think you're not going to do jobs, you may still want to, because that's a great way to measure the client. And one job may make more than the other job, or if it's a really good client over time, you can then decide discounts, things like that. So those are pieces that you want to make sure you do for job costing. The other thing we can talk about is, do you need third-party apps? Remember that I mentioned that QuickBooks, if you think of it as a wagon wheel, and it goes out from there, there's things that it does, but people need it to do better. So do you need better sales tax monitoring? Because that has become a tricky, sticky subject nowadays, and we all hate the words LexisNexis, but everybody wants their piece of the pie, especially with this e-commerce going on, because people are realizing that, or I should say state governments are realizing that they're not getting their cut. So they are actually making, that you have to be aware of, do I pay sales tax here? Do I pay sales tax where the customer is? So we partner with Avalara, and they know it so well, they can do sales tax by longitude and latitude. So we can coordinate that with you. Do you need time tracking, where you don't want everybody in your QuickBooks file, but you want them to be able to track time so that it feeds into your QuickBooks payroll? We partner with Intuit, and we sell T-sheets. Great tool, can be used on the phones of the managers. You can actually have a Kindle or something in the warehouse where people clock in. It has face recognition, so people can't clock each other in. That's a great tool. And then we talk about payroll. QuickBooks offers several different versions of payroll, from the do-it-yourself payroll to the semi-do-it-yourself payroll to they do assisted payroll. So it's almost like an ADP type version, where you get the time, comes in as timesheets from T-sheets, and then you basically pay the employees, and then Intuit takes care of everything else. Robust inventory management. Like I said, inventory is a beast of its own, but people have other uses, other needs, especially in the manufacturing world. So we actually partner with Fishbowl, and that is a bolt-on that will just send financial information to you. There's point of sale. Some of you may have retail locations. QuickBooks has a great point of sale system that we can help set up and train. It then provides financial information to the QuickBooks. The inventory is not maintained in the QuickBooks financial system. It's actually maintained in the point of sale system. So there's a lot of ways, a lot of things that people think of a data migration. It might just be, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give them a file, I'm going to get a file. We become much more involved with you than that, because the whole point is we don't want to commit the same mistakes that were made before, and we want to make sure that your file stays healthy over the long run. So we want to make sure we spend time with you in terms of, do we have the file the information set up. Are you aware QuickBooks can do different things like these third-party apps, those kind of pieces to all of that. So while we do data migrations, we actually do a lot more for you than that. I've become some of the QuickBooks counselors for people. I've had clients for many years that originally were a data migration, and their business model may change or something happens in the business. They call, we discuss, we either work with their current QuickBooks file to help them make those changes in terms of classes and items and customer types and all the different tags that you can put on one line of data that can spit out all kinds of information. So I always say that QuickBooks is like Yahtzee. I can go for a full house, I can go for 3 of a kind, I can go for a pair, that kind of thing. So really, a data migration with us is a lot more than us funneling the information into QuickBooks. It's making sure that you like your new file, you enjoy your new file, and that you can use it to the full ability of all of that. So I know there was a lot there. Jennifer, do we have any questions?
Awesome. Vicki, thank you so much. And I have to say, my daughter heard you say Yahtzee and she lit up a little bit here in the room. So you had her attention as well. This was a really great presentation, and I love at the end how you kind of just looped in a lot of the other things that out of the box technology has to offer. Like you said, a data migration isn't just a data migration. There's it, and just extending beyond that and how we can help service that. So great job. A lot of really positive feedback from the audience. Couple questions that we have here, and before we dive into those, I'm just going to run one of our polls. There's going to be 3 total here. Just a couple of simple questions for the audience to answer to get that CPE credit. So the first one is just really simply, have you ever gone through a data migration? Yes, no, maybe you don't know. Hopefully after this great session with Vicki, you know if you've gone through one. But if you could just answer that real quick, and if you have any questions for Vicki, go ahead and send those over via the chat. One that we have here, Vicki, for you is, how can you or would you ever go from QuickBooks Enterprise 20, like where they just changed over to 20, and go back to 19 or go to a previous version? Could you go backwards in a sense?
No, you can't. And do you need to take presenter over so they can see the poll?
It should be, I think it's launched.
Okay, I just wanted to, yeah,
should be
I just wanted to
okay.
make sure. So yeah,
No,
so once so here's the thing with QuickBooks is that once you go from 19 to 20, you can't go back. Same thing that is cautionary about Pro and Premier upgrading to Enterprise. It's very difficult to go back. So no, sorry. But once you're in the newer version, you're better off anyway.
Yep, absolutely. That is very, very true. All right, so our next poll is a little quick quiz kind of thing on something that Vicki touched on earlier, which is, what are some reasons you might create a new file? So I'm just going to run those up if everyone wants to answer. And the next question is kind of for both of us, I guess, but do we offer any sort of classes or training on QuickBooks point of sale? You had mentioned that that's something that is offered. Some people will use point of sale if they're in a retail environment kind of thing, but do we offer any sort of one-on-one type of training? Is that something that you would do, or maybe some of our other consultants who are well versed in point of sale, that they could get this one-on-one training?
Yes, so we do offer some training on point of sale. Point of sale is a tricky thing, in which if you're using it already, you probably already know. So we actually have, I'll do training, set up kind of the basic things, and then we actually have an advanced consultant as well, that if your file has problems, that kind of thing. So yes, we do support point of sale.
Excellent. And then the last thing I just kind of wanted to touch on before we do one more poll question and close things out is you talked about the discovery meeting, which I think was a great thing to go over and explain to everyone on the line today and anyone watching on demand what that would look like. But if they did want, say, like after this presentation, yep, I am ready for a data migration. What do I do? What's my next step? How do I get started?
We just redid our website, so I'm going to defer that one question to you. So do we have a contact form on our new website?
We do. Yep, right on the website. And we did. Thank you. That was something I was going to talk about in our close, but we did just rebrand, as you can see from our slides today. And if you visit our website, we did just go through a whole migration of our website and our branding and whatnot. So if you haven't checked that out, take a look. But we do have a contact us form on the website. And actually, right from the home page, there's 2 new buttons. You can just call us, right? There's a button, you click it and it'll call us right away. Or you can schedule a call and that'll take you to the contact form and just kind of, I guess, describe, right? If that's what you're looking for, describe where you're at, where you're looking to go, and someone will get in touch with you to get started with that project.
Exactly right. And that's the thing, is just, put on there that my verify is I'm getting errors from that. It won't even complete. Oh, one thing I failed to mention, this is really important. When you're running that verify and you have errors and it says that you need to rebuild your file, stop, don't rebuild the file. Make sure you do a backup, then do a rebuild, but don't do the rebuild more than once. What will happen is that QuickBooks file, that rebuild will cement some of those errors in there and can actually do more harm than good. But it's okay to try it, but make sure you do a backup before you run that rebuild, because then you still have a clean copy that hasn't been kind of force channeled in that rebuild, and we can actually use that file, even if it's corrupt, to work on. So that's really important to remember.
Excellent. Thank you for that tip, for sure. Our next question is, how can we assign inventory items to jobs? An item was purchased and placed in inventory, and then we would like to assign it to a project or job, and we use QuickBooks Enterprise.
That happens when you pay the bill, just like any other expense. So when you buy it, when you pay the bill on that line, you assign it to the customer job.
Awesome. Easy as pie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the questions we had from the audience today. If anyone else, go ahead and keep coming with the questions. I'm going to run one last poll, and I bet most people on the line can guess what it's going to be. But are you interested in learning more about data migrations? And you can answer accordingly if you're ready to get in touch with our team and start working with Vicki and her staff. They really do an excellent job. I know all the team members over there under Vicki are just really great. They offer just a great service. I know we have a lot of people who are very satisfied after working with her team, and just are really impressed with the knowledge and background. So go ahead and answer that, and give you a few more seconds. And Vicki, did you have anything else to kind of mention or add before we close out here today?
No, I mean, it's what you may not think is a problem with your file could be. And like say, if you are not doing that backup, don't think of the backup as a backup, but think of it as getting a health check run on your file. It is the best way and about the only way to start to know if that file is going to start having problems, because it will give you a heads up. Also make sure, really importantly, that every user goes into that edit preferences and does that do not save windows, because in a multi-user environment, leaving that open also creates problems with that as well. So there's just a lot of things you can do that maintain the health of your file, and you'll just got to be careful, but the backup is the biggest piece.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We had one more question that just came in here. What if a bill was paid and sits in inventory and needs to be reassigned at a later date?
To, I assume, to a different customer.
To a job.
Yep. So
Yep.
that again is an easy one. So if you have to use the right checks, and basically go to the items tab on that check, put in that inventory item as a negative from the one job, put in the inventory item as a positive to the other job, and in a way you've done an inventory transfer. So I have clients that buy stuff in bulk, and they actually have a customer and job called shop. And when they buy it, they put it in bulk to the shop. And then as they take it out for each job, that's what they do, so that they can transfer that cost from out of the shop warehouse to each customer.
Perfect, thank you. And then one more question, if you can just touch a little bit more on what the F2 function does and what it means. Someone is asking specifically about that.
So that F2 function, I will try and go back to that slide. Whoops. Is of course locked up on me. So that's an important slide because it shows a lot of things about your file. It tells you what your license number is, your product number. This is a big piece right here. It tells you what release you're on. Make sure you do those updates that pop up from QuickBooks. I don't always like to be the first one. I like to wait a little while, but make sure you're doing those. So this screen is kind of your crystal ball in terms of how the file is going. This file was a 2020 enterprise file, and I had installed it in March of 2019, and I've opened this file 152 times, kind of thing. This has been a file that's been upgraded numerous times since 2005. This was actually a sample company. So it just tells you, again, if you had other applications integrated with your QuickBooks file, it would tell you that as well. So this is kind of the, what do I want to say, kind of the information. It's the business card for your file. Just gives you all of the great information that you need to know, where it's running from, what's the server name. It's just kind of the tell-all for your file, but you use the F2 key to get to that.
Absolutely, thank you. I know a lot of our consultants use that a lot, even just as a jumping off point to answer a few little questions that are really helpful. So that F2 is really a good shortcut.
Yes, because what's one of the things that if I'm talking with somebody, I'll ask them to hit the F2, database file fragments and memory size. Those are two big indicators to me of what might be going on in your file, and then we can drill down from there. But those two might be the first two things that can cause corruption in your file.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, I think that's all the questions that we have. Vicki, thank you so much. I know you're a super busy lady these days, so I appreciate you taking time to prepare this information and present it to the audience today.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
If anybody has questions, give me a holler. I love teaching you all how to use it better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to take the screen back real quick. I just have one slide to share, which is my contact information and our website. Like I said, we did revamp the website over the last week or two. There is still the contact form there, and our phone number directly. If you did want to get started or have any further questions, we can get you in touch with Vicki, get some appointments set up. Or if you have a topic that you want us to dive deeper on, that you want to learn more about, let me know. Send me an email and just say, there's a couple of people actually who through the chat today gave me some information that they want us to dive deeper on and do a session on. So I appreciate that. We want to deliver what you guys want. So let us know, and we'll be sure to do a Tech Tuesday on your topic. And also just with everything that's going on in the environment right now with COVID-19, and I know in my state, Michigan, we are in a stay home, stay safe regulation, so everyone is working from home. But one really exciting thing about out-of-the-box technology is we are still up and running. We can help you remotely. It's really a huge value of our business is that we can do it that way. So if you are looking for help, if maybe your regular bookkeeper or person who works on your books is not available to help you because of the situation that you're in, or if you can't get a hold of Intuit or whatever the case may be, we're open, we're here, we're ready to support you. So don't hesitate to reach out, and that's what we're here for. So again, Vicki, thank you. Everyone who joined us live, thank you so much. If you're watching on demand, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch us today. And you'll see an email in about an hour or two with a link to the recording of this session if you want to watch anything back or just take a few more notes on anything that Vicki touched on. You'll get that email shortly. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.